On a sold-out transatlantic flight from New York to London, a senior flight attendant with a flawless record makes a fatal miscalculation. She sees a pregnant black woman in first class, not as a premium passenger, but as a problem to be managed. Fueled by prejudice and the stress of a long day, she commits an act of shocking aggression, a sharp, stinging slap that echoes through the silent cabin. But what she doesn't know is that the woman she just assaulted isn't just another passenger. She's the wife of the man who signs her paychecks, the man who built the entire airline from a single plane. This isn't just a story about a bad day at work. It's about the moment Karma boarded Flight 727 with a first-class ticket and a very long memory. The air in the Aura Air Celestial Lounge at JFK was a carefully curated symphony of tranquility. Soft jazz notes mingled with the gentle clinking of porcelain and the distant muted roar of jet engines. It was an oasis of calm amidst the controlled chaos of international travel. Dr. Simone Monroe, however, felt none of it. Her hand rested protectively on the gentle swell of her 6-month pregnancy, a small constant reassurance in a world that had suddenly tilted on its axis. Her phone buzzed with another text from her sister in London. "Dad's stable, but the doctors are still concerned. He's asking for you." Simone, a distinguished pediatric cardiologist from Johns Hopkins, was used to being the one providing calm, measured updates, not receiving them. The irony was a bitter pill. She had boarded this last-minute flight, leaving her husband Marcus to handle a crucial investor meeting in San Francisco. He had insisted she go, his voice a warm, steady anchor over the phone. "Go be with your father, Eve. I'll reroute and meet you there as soon as the deal is closed. Aura Air will take care of you." Aura Air. Marcus's baby. He had built it from a scrappy charter service into a boutique luxury airline renowned for its service. He poured his soul into every detail, from the thread count on the duvets in the sleep pods to the sommelier-selected wine list. For Simone, flying Aura Air usually felt like an extension of home. Today, it was just a means to an end, a 7-hour chasm of anxiety she had to cross. As she was escorted to the gate for priority boarding, she felt a familiar wave of morning sickness, an unwelcome companion that had overstayed its first trimester welcome. All she wanted was to curl up in her seat with a bottle of water and a blanket and disappear until they landed at Heathrow. She found her seat 1A, a private suite at the very front of the first-class cabin. She settled into the plush leather, her body sighing in relief. She was just closing her eyes when a crisp, almost sharp voice cut through her momentary peace. "Ma'am, I'll need to take your coat and stow your handbag for takeoff." Simone looked up at a flight attendant whose name tag read Karen Miller. She was a woman in her late 40s with blonde hair pulled back into a severe bun and a smile that didn't reach her cold blue eyes. There was an air of rigid authority about her, the kind that comes from decades of enforcing federal aviation regulations and judging passengers' carry-on luggage. "Of course," Simone said, her voice a little tired. "Could I possibly get a bottle of water before we take off? I'm feeling a bit unwell." Karen's smile tightened. "We'll begin our full beverage service once we reach cruising altitude." "I understand," Simone replied, trying to keep her tone even. "I just feel a little dehydrated. I'm pregnant, and a simple bottle of water would really help." Karen glanced dismissively at Simone's bump, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. It was a look Simone had seen before, a subtle cocktail of doubt and annoyance. It was the look that questioned whether she truly belonged here, in this seat on this plane. The rules are for everyone's safety. All items must be stowed and all passengers must be seated. Once the captain turns off the seatbelt sign, I'll see what I can do." With that, she took Simone's bag and coat and disappeared. Simone sighed, leaning her head back. It was a small thing, a bottle of water, but the dismissive refusal felt personal. She tried to brush it off, blaming the woman's stress or her own heightened sensitivity. The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety video featuring a cameo from Marcus that always made her smile flickered to life. As the plane taxied towards the runway, Simone tried to adjust her seatbelt. The standard belt dug uncomfortably into her lower abdomen. She had flown just 3 weeks prior, and the crew had immediately and discreetly provided her with a seatbelt extender for comfort and safety. She looked for a call button, but Karen was already making her final pass through the cabin. "Excuse me," Simone called out softly as Karen approached. "Could I get a seatbelt extender? This one is quite uncomfortable." Karen stopped, her posture stiffening. She looked down at Simone, then at the fastened belt, her lips pursed in a thin line of disapproval. "Ma'am, you need to be properly secured for takeoff. The belt is designed to sit low and tight across your hips." "I know," Simone said patiently, her medical training kicking in. "But on a pregnant woman that can put undue pressure on the uterus, an extender allows it to be positioned safely below the belly. Your colleague on my flight from Baltimore gave me one without any issue." Karen's expression soured. "I am the purser on this flight, and I am telling you that you are wearing it correctly. We don't just hand out extenders because a passenger finds the belt uncomfortable. They are for passengers of size who cannot otherwise secure the belt." The implication was clear and deeply insulting. Simone felt a flush of anger rise in her chest, but she tamped it down. "It's not about comfort, it's about safety. Standard procedure for pregnant passengers on most major airlines, including, I believe, this one. I am aware of the procedure." Karen snapped, her voice now loud enough to draw the attention of the passenger in 2A, a young man with headphones around his neck, who was now watching with undisguised interest. "And in my 20 years of flying, I've never had a complaint. Please keep the belt as it is." She made a move to walk away. This was no longer about a seatbelt or a bottle of water. It was about dignity. "I'm a doctor," Simone said, her voice quiet but firm, laced with an authority that Karen was not expecting. "And I am telling you that this is not safe for my baby. I will not put my child at risk because of your refusal to follow your own airline's protocol. Please get me an extender or get the captain." The cabin fell silent. The young man in 2A, whose name was Liam, had discreetly propped his phone up on his tray table and started recording. Karen's face, already pale, turned a mottled red. To be challenged so directly, so publicly by this woman, it was an affront to her authority, her experience, her entire sense of order. In her mind, Simone was no longer a passenger. She was a problem, an uppity woman who thought her first-class ticket gave her the right to question the crew. All the day's frustrations, a fight with her ex-husband over money, a younger flight attendant getting a more desirable route, the relentless pressure of the job coalesced into a single point of white-hot fury directed at Dr. Simone Monroe. "I am the authority here," Karen hissed, leaning down, her face inches from Simone's. "You will do as you are told. You will sit back, you will be quiet, and you will not question me again. Do you understand? Me." Simone was stunned by the venom in the woman's voice. She did the only thing she could think to do. She stood up or tried to her pregnant belly, making the movement awkward in the confined space. She needed to create distance to de-escalate, to find another crew member. "I will not be spoken to this way," Simone said, her voice trembling slightly with a mixture of shock and anger. "I am a passenger, and you are—" She never finished the sentence. In a flash of pure, unrestrained rage, Karen's hand shot out. The sound was a sickening crack that cut through the cabin's hum. A slap, hard and sharp across Simone's face. Time seemed to freeze. Simone stumbled back into her seat, her hand flying to her cheek, her mind reeling in disbelief. The sting on her skin was nothing compared to the profound shock, the absolute violation. A gasp came from an older woman across the aisle. Liam in 2A caught his breath, his phone still recording the lens capturing the raw, ugly moment in perfect, damning clarity. Karen stood frozen for a second, her own eyes wide with a flicker of horror at what she'd done. The dam of her professionalism had not just cracked, it had been obliterated. But just as quickly, the horror was replaced by a defiant, defensive glare. Simone's world narrowed to the throbbing on her cheek and the face of the woman who had put it there. The anxiety about her father, the nausea, the stress of the trip, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying calm. The wife of Marcus Thorne had just been assaulted on an Aura Air flight, and Karen Miller had no idea of the world of consequences she had just unleashed upon herself. The slap's echo faded, but the silence it left behind was heavy and suffocating. Every eye in the first-class cabin was fixed on the tableau. Simone, cradling her cheek in stunned disbelief, and Karen standing rigid, her chest heaving as adrenaline warred with the dawning horror of her actions. A junior flight attendant, a young woman named Chloe, with wide, frightened eyes, rushed forward from the galley. "Karen, what happened?" Karen shot her a venomous look. This passenger became aggressive and unfastened her seatbelt during taxi. She was a threat. The lie was blatant, a desperate scramble to reframe reality. But Liam in seat 2A wasn't having it. He lowered his phone, his face pale with shock. "A threat. She asked for a seatbelt extender. You screamed in her face and you hit her. I got the whole thing on video." Karen's head whipped toward him, her eyes wild. "You are not permitted to film the crew. That is a federal offense. Assaulting a pregnant passenger is a bit more serious, don't you think?" Liam retorted, his voice shaking but firm. The commotion reached the cockpit. A calm, authoritative female voice came over the intercom. "Cabin crew report to the flight deck. Now!" It was Captain Eva Rostova, a no-nonsense veteran pilot known for her unflappable demeanor. Chloe, looking terrified but resolute, touched Karen's arm. "We have to go." As Karen was led away, her face a mask of defiant fury. Chloe paused beside Simone's seat. "Ma'am, Dr. Monroe, are you all right? I'm so sorry. Let me get you some water, an ice pack." Simone finally found her voice, though it was raspy. "My baby. I felt a sharp pain when she—" She couldn't finish, her hand flying to her abdomen, where a cramp was tightening like a fist. The stress, the shock, the physical jolt. It was all converging on the most vulnerable part of her. Panic flared in Chloe's eyes. Okay. We're returning to the gate immediately. The captain has already called for medics to meet us." The plane, which had been nearing the runway, began a slow, deliberate turn back towards the terminal. An announcement from Captain Rostova came over the speakers, her voice devoid of emotion, but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a security incident in the cabin, we are returning to the gate. We appreciate your patience." We will provide more information shortly. Passengers in the other cabins began to murmur, their curiosity piqued. In first class, the atmosphere was thick with a shared sense of shock. The older woman who had gasped, a Mrs. Gable, leaned across the aisle. "My dear, are you all right? I saw the whole thing. That woman was a menace. You were perfectly calm." "Thank you," Simone whispered the validation, a small comfort. She accepted the ice pack Chloe offered, pressing it to her throbbing cheek. The physical pain was a dull ache, but the emotional turmoil was a raging storm. Her primary concern shifted entirely to the life inside her. The cramping was persistent, a terrifying reminder of her baby's fragility. When the plane docked, the jet bridge connected with a soft thud that sounded like a gavel. The door opened not to disembarking passengers, but to 2 Port Authority police officers and a team of paramedics. They came directly to Simone's seat. Karen Miller was escorted off the plane, first her face stony, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. The police were professional quiet, asking her to accompany them. The paramedics were gentle and efficient, checking Simone's vitals and listening to her description of the cramping. "We need to get you to a hospital to be monitored, ma'am," the lead paramedic said kindly. "Just as a precaution." As they helped her to her feet, a representative from Aura Air's ground staff, a man in a crisp suit named David, approached her. His face was a picture of professional concern. "Dr. Monroe, I am the station manager. I am profoundly sorry for what you have experienced on our flight. We have a private lounge for you where you can wait for transport, and we will handle everything. Your luggage, your onward travel to London, everything." Simone just nodded, feeling numb. She allowed herself to be led off the plane, away from the prying eyes of the other passengers. In the sterile quiet of the Celestial Lounge, the very place her ordeal had begun, she finally let the tears fall. They weren't just for the humiliation or the pain, but for the fear. Fear for her baby, and fear for her father waiting for her across an ocean she now felt unable to cross. David, the station manager, handed her a bottled water. "Is there anyone we can call for you, Dr. Monroe?" Simone wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. Yes, there was one person. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled as she found the contact. Marcus. He would still be in his meeting on the West Coast. It was 3 hours earlier there. She shouldn't bother him. But the promise he'd made, "Aura Air will take care of you," echoed in her head with a crushing irony. She needed him. She hit dial. It rang twice before he picked up. "Eve, is everything okay? Did you land already?" His voice was clear and strong, the sound of home. And then she broke. A sob escaped her, raw and uncontrolled. "Marcus?" The shift in his tone was immediate. The easygoing husband was gone, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of a CEO sensing a crisis. "Simone. What is it? What happened? Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" Through her tears, she recounted the story. The dismissiveness, the argument over the seatbelt, the condescending tone, and then the unthinkable, the slap. She told him about the cramping and the paramedics. On the other end of the line, 3,000 miles away, in a glass-walled boardroom in San Francisco, Marcus Thorne went completely still. The investors across the table watched as every ounce of warmth drained from his face, replaced by an expression of such cold, controlled fury that it seemed to lower the temperature of the room. He held up a hand, a silent command for Mullants, and turned his back to them. His voice, when he spoke to Simone, was terrifyingly soft. "What was her name, Eve?" "Karen," Simone whispered. "Karen Miller." "Okay, baby, listen to me. You are safe now. Let the medics take you to the hospital. Get checked out. That is your only priority. Do not worry about your father. Do not worry about your luggage. Do not worry about a thing. I am handling it. But your meeting, the meeting is over, he said, his voice flat and hard as granite. I'm on my way. I love you. He hung up. He turned back to the stunned investors. Gentlemen, I apologize. A severe family emergency has arisen. We will have to postpone. Without another word, he packed his briefcase, his movements precise and economical. His assistant, a young man named Ben, scurried after him. Mr. Thorne. What do I tell them? Where are you going? Marcus didn't break his stride as he headed for the private elevator. Clear my schedule for the rest of the week. Get the jet ready for immediate departure. Destination JFK. And get Daniel Chen in HR and Jessica Alvarez from our legal team on a conference call with me in 30 minutes. Tell them to access all records, flight manifests and personnel files for Aura Air Flight 707 New York to London. There's been an incident. Meanwhile, back at JFK, Liam, the student from seat 2A, was sitting in the main terminal. His heart still pounding. He watched the video on his phone one more time. The audio was crystal clear. The sharp crack of the slap. The flight attendant's snarled words. The pregnant woman's gasp of pain. It was irrefutable. He knew what he had to do. He opened his social media apps. He wrote a simple caption. Unbelievable. Senior flight attendant on @Aura Air Flight 707 physically assaults a pregnant black woman in first class for asking for a seatbelt extender. Share this. This can't be swept under the rug. He attached the video and added the hashtags. @Aura Air #flight 777 assault #corporate accountability. Justice for Simone. He hit post. And a firestorm began to ignite online, completely unbeknownst to the corporate leadership of Aura Air, who were about to get a call from their furious founder. A founder whose wife was at that very moment being wheeled into an ambulance, her face bruised and her body trembling with fear for their unborn child. The karma Karen Miller had set in motion was no longer a distant threat. It was a private jet, thundering across the country at 600 miles per hour, carrying the one man she should never ever have crossed. Aura Air's global headquarters in Austin, Texas, was a testament to Marcus Thorne's vision. The sleek glass tower hummed with a quiet, confident energy, a place where ambition was the currency and innovation was the mandate. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the 34th floor was buzzing with the triumphant afterglow of the San Francisco deal Marcus was meant to be closing. VPs were patting each other on the back, and the stock price was climbing. It was a mood of celebration. But on the other side of the floor, in the firewalled offices of human resources and legal, a different kind of energy was gathering. A dark, anxious pressure was building a rumor that had snaked its way from the operations team at JFK, an incident, a flight return to gate a first-class passenger. It was still just whispers, but it was enough to curdle the celebratory mood for anyone who heard them. Daniel Chen, the impeccably tailored vice president of human resources, felt that curdling in the pit of his stomach. He stared at the email summons that had just landed in his inbox, its subject line stark and demanding. Urgent conference call, M. Thorne. A direct call from the founder during the final hours of a landmark deal was unprecedented. It was a 5-alarm fire bell. He immediately picked up his phone and dialed the extension for Jessica Alvarez, the airline's general counsel, whose office was one floor above. "Jess, you get the summons?" he asked without preamble. "Just did." Her voice came back, already sharp and alert, the easygoing lawyer he joked with at company mixers, gone replaced by the formidable litigator who had saved the airline millions. "My gut says this has nothing to do with the San Francisco deal. The subject line mentioned Flight 777. I'm pulling the preliminary reports as we speak." On their respective computer screens, the files appeared. The first was the official report from Captain Eva Rostova, a pilot known for her stoicism. It was dry, professional, and full of carefully chosen FAA-compliant language. Flight 777 returned to gate at JFK due to a disruptive passenger incident involving purser Karen Miller and a passenger in seat 1A. Passenger alleged verbal abuse and physical contact. Purser Miller alleged passenger was non-compliant and aggressive. Port Authority police met the aircraft. Purser Miller has been placed on administrative leave pending full investigation. Passenger removed for medical evaluation. Standard by-the-book report from Rostova. Daniel murmured, scrolling. She gives nothing away. "That's what worries me," Jessica retorted. "Now look at Miller's statement." Daniel opened the second file. Karen Miller's own report was a masterpiece of corporate self-preservation. It painted a vivid picture of a heroic flight attendant under siege. She described the passenger as unusually demanding from the moment she boarded, and claimed she refused multiple polite requests to secure her seatbelt in accordance with federal law. The climax of her narrative was a carefully crafted paragraph of passive, evasive language. The passenger's agitation escalated to the point where she became a physical threat to herself and the cabin. In an attempt to de-escalate and create a safe space, I raised my hands defensively. In the process, I inadvertently made contact with the passenger's face while gesturing for her to remain seated. Jessica scoffed, her voice dripping with contempt. Inadvertently made contact while gesturing. That's not an explanation, Dan. That's a lie someone stayed up all night rehearsing. It's the kind of phrase people use when they know they're guilty. Agreed, Daniel said, pulling up Karen Miller's personnel file. 22 years with the airline. Not a single official complaint. A wall of commendations for punctuality and perfect uniform adherence. On paper, she's our best flight attendant. On paper, Jessica echoed skeptically. People with files this clean are either saints or sociopaths who are masters at burying their mistakes and intimidating their colleagues into silence. My money is on the latter. Who was the passenger? Daniel scrolled through the flight manifest. Seat 1A, a Dr. Simone Monroe. Last-minute booking, full fare, first class. One-way ticket to London. No frequent flyer history with us under that name. Before they could theorize further, their dedicated conference line chimed with the 3-tone signal reserved for the executive channel. The caller ID was Stark M. Thorne. They both straightened in their chairs, the air in their offices suddenly feeling thin and charged. Daniel, Jessica, thank you for joining. Marcus's voice filled the speaker. There was no warmth, no pleasantry. It was a voice stripped of all emotion, save for a chilling, compressed fury. It was the sound of a controlled explosion. I want a full, unredacted report on the incident involving purser Karen Miller on Flight 777 at JFK today. I want every statement, every witness name, and a copy of the purser's complete employment history on my desk before my plane touches down in New York. Of course, Marcus, Daniel began, trying to keep his voice level. We have the initial reports now. It appears there was a significant dispute over cabin safety procedures. It was not a dispute. Marcus cut him off, his voice dropping an octave into a register of pure menace. It was an assault. Your purser, your 22-year veteran, slapped a pregnant passenger across the face. The words landed like a physical blow. Daniel Chen felt the blood drain from his face. Jessica let out a short, sharp breath. This was a nightmare. A full-blown, company-killing nightmare. The passenger in seat 1A. Marcus continued, his voice now dangerously, terrifyingly quiet. Is Dr. Simone Monroe. I'm going to need you both to use the full extent of your professional discretion and intelligence to understand the gravity of this situation when I tell you that Dr. Monroe is my wife. For a full 10 seconds, there was absolute silence on the line, broken only by the sound of Daniel Chen's own heart pounding in his ears. Simone Monroe. Simone Thorne. Of course, she used her professional name. The owner's wife. Pregnant. Assaulted by their own senior staff on their own flagship aircraft. The floor seemed to drop out from beneath Daniel's chair. He saw his career, his pension, and the company's pristine reputation flashing before his eyes. Jessica, ever the lawyer, found her voice, first a slight tremor, belying her professional composure. Marcus, my God, is the baby okay? She's at Lenox Hill Hospital. They are cautiously optimistic, he said, and for a fleeting moment, the voice of a terrified husband broke through the CEO's armor before being ruthlessly suppressed. Which is more than I can say for Ms. Miller's career, or for our entire corporate culture, if this is the kind of employee we have been rewarding for 2 decades. The steel returned to his voice harder than before. I want a surgical, merciless investigation. I don't want a cover-up. I want an excavation. I want you to dig until you hit bedrock. I want every passenger from that first-class cabin contacted personally by a senior manager tonight. Not an email, a phone call. Apologize and get on their unvarnished statements. I want the gate security footage, the lounge footage, and every scrap of internal video from that aircraft. I want Karen Miller's work rota for the last 5 years, her colleague reviews, official and unofficial. Find out who she flew with. Find out who was afraid of her. I want to know who trained her, who promoted her, and who has been signing off on her perfect record. Am I clear? Crystal. Jessica said, her fingers already flying across her keyboard, a flurry of emails dispatching her legal team. One more thing, Marcus added. Our PR team is about to walk into a hurricane. A video of the assault is going viral as we speak. Find it, analyze it, and then prepare a public statement. No excuses, no defensive corporate speak. I want us to get in front of this with the unvarnished truth. We will state the facts. An employee of Aura Air committed an act of violence against a passenger. We will announce her termination and a full, transparent investigation. And we will apologize. We will beg for forgiveness. We own this, all of it. The call ended, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. Daniel, still reeling numbly, typed Natar Aura Air into a social media search bar. The first result, already trending nationally, was a post from a user named Liam Carter 22. He clicked play. The quality was horrifically good. He saw Dr. Simone Monroe, a woman he now recognized from company holiday party photos, her face a mask of dignified disbelief. He heard her calm, intelligent voice advocating for her own safety. And then he saw Karen Miller, her face twisted into a snarl of pure malice, leaning in her voice a venomous hiss. And then, the slap. Unmistakable. Vicious. Cruel. Daniel felt physically sick. The comment section was a roaring torrent of digital fury. At Aura Air, fire her now. And I hope she gets sued into oblivion. Boycott Aura Air. As a flight attendant for another airline, this is horrifying. This is assault period. That woman does not deserve her wings. Just saw this on CNN's breaking news feed. Your stock is going to tank at Aura Air. You guys are done. It was already a tsunami. News outlets were running with it. Their stock, just hours before, the pride of the market, was now projected to open with a catastrophic drop. The San Francisco deal was forgotten. Meanwhile, at Lenox Hill Hospital, Simone lay in the quiet dimness of a private room. The terrifying cramps had subsided, and the steady rhythmic thump, thump, thump of her baby's heartbeat on the fetal monitor was the only sound that mattered. Dr. Anya Sharma, the obstetrician, had been wonderfully reassuring. "Everything looks stable, Dr. Monroe," she'd said. "The baby is strong, but we want to keep you overnight. The most important thing now is rest and zero stress." Easy for her to say. Simone scrolled through the news on her phone and saw it. Her own face, a pixelated still from the video, blurred but recognizable under a blaring headline. "Shocking video flight attendant assaults. Pregnant passenger on luxury airline." Reading the story, seeing the outrage from thousands of strangers, was a bizarre, out-of-body experience. It was horrifyingly public, but it was also a profound validation. She wasn't crazy. She hadn't overreacted. The world saw what she had felt. It was wrong. Hours later, the door to her room opened softly. Marcus stood there. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 10 hours. His suit jacket was gone, his tie was loosened, and his face was etched with exhaustion. But his eyes, locked on her, were filled with a universe of love relief and a deep, simmering fury. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and took her hand. His touch infinitely gentle, as if she were made of priceless, fragile porcelain. He didn't speak at first, just leaned down and pressed a long, soft kiss to her forehead, then another to the swell of her belly, over the thin hospital blanket. "I'm so sorry, Eve." He finally whispered, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely showed. "I promised my airline would take care of you. I promised. And it let you down in the worst way imaginable." "It wasn't the airline, Marcus," she said softly, her fingers tracing the worry lines on his brow. "It was one hateful person." He looked up, and she saw the cold fire return to his eyes. One hateful person who was allowed to thrive in our system for 22 years, he countered. "That is a failure of leadership. That is on me, and I am going to fix it. I am going to tear down the culture that allowed her to exist and rebuild it from the foundation up. I promise you that." His phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it. It was from Jessica Alvarez. "We have her. Karen Miller has been called for a formal debriefing at JFK Ops 10 a.m. tomorrow. She's walking into the lion's den and has no idea." Marcus typed a quick reply. He then put the phone away and looked back at his wife, his expression softening once more. "You rest, Eve. You and our baby. That's all that matters." He kissed her again. "I have a meeting to attend tomorrow." He was no longer just the husband. He was the founder, the CEO, the owner. He was the lion, and judgment was coming to New York. The Aura Air JFK Operations Center was a world Karen Miller knew intimately. For 22 years, its corridors had been her domain. She walked down the hallway, the brisk, authoritative click of her heels on the polished terrazzo floor, a familiar sound of her own importance. She felt a knot of anxiety, of course, but it was a shallow, manageable feeling, easily overshadowed by a towering sense of righteous indignation. Her union rep had been clear stick to the script. She had replayed the narrative in her mind 100 times until it felt like the absolute truth. The passenger was agitated and non-compliant, a clear and present danger during a critical phase of ground movement. I felt threatened. My actions were solely to maintain control and ensure the safety of the cabin. The viral video was a pest, an illegally recorded snippet, stripped of all context. It was amateur theatrics against her decades of decorated service. The company, she reasoned with the conviction of a veteran, would always protect its own. They needed her. They would quell this social media brushfire with a quiet settlement and a non-disclosure agreement for the passenger. In a week, it would all be forgotten. She was safe. She adjusted the collar of her crisp uniform blouse and pushed open the heavy oak door to the designated conference room. And froze. The air rushed from her lungs. This was not the small, sterile debriefing room she had been expecting. This was the main boardroom, a chamber of power she had only ever glimpsed from the hallway. A cavernous space of dark wood, brushed steel and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bustling runways of JFK. A colossal mahogany table, so polished it reflected the grim sky outside, stretched down its length like a judicial bench. At the far end, silhouetted against the window, sat a panel of figures. She instantly recognized Daniel Chen, the VP of Human Resources, and Jessica Alvarez, the airline's formidable general counsel. Their faces were stony, unreadable masks, but it was the man at the head of the table who made her heart stop dead in her chest. Marcus Thorne. He wasn't a picture in a magazine or a face on the safety video anymore. He was there in the flesh, radiating an aura of such intense, still power that it seemed to consume all the oxygen in the room. The CEO himself. Here. For her. The cold dread that began to seep into her bones was no longer a vague anxiety. It was a paralyzing, icy certainty. The carefully constructed walls of her self-assurance didn't just crack. They vaporized. She felt small, transparent, and terrifyingly exposed. "Ms. Miller, thank you for coming," Marcus said. His voice was unnervingly calm, a quiet baritone that carried across the vast table with absolute command. It was the gentleness of a surgeon before the first incision, and it was more frightening than any shout. "Please have a seat." His gesture indicated a single isolated chair positioned directly opposite him. The walk to it felt like a mile across a barren desert. Her heels, once a sound of authority, now seemed to echo with a pathetic, hollow click. She sat down, her back ramrod straight, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap. Her knuckles were white. "We are here, as you know, to discuss the incident on Flight 777 yesterday." Marcus began, his gaze unwavering and intense. He hadn't blinked. "I have read your official statement. Before we proceed with the company's evidence, I would like to give you the opportunity to recount the events in your own words. Tell me what happened from your perspective." It was a trap, and she knew it, but it was the only path offered. This was her last chance to sell the lie. She cleared her throat, her voice emerging as a strained, reedy version of its usual self. "Miss Thorne, the passenger in 1A became very difficult as we prepared for takeoff. She was refusing to secure her seatbelt correctly. When I instructed her on the proper procedure, she became verbally aggressive. She was agitated, unfastening her belt, and attempting to stand up while we were taxiing. I was deeply concerned for her safety and the safety of the flight. My only intention was to de-escalate to create space. She trailed off, the rehearsed words sounding flimsy and absurd in the tomb-like silence of the room. Marcus listened patiently, his expression unchanging. When she finished, he nodded slowly. A compelling narrative of a flight attendant acting under pressure to maintain order. A narrative of heroism, almost. He let the word hang in the air for a beat. Unfortunately for you, Ms. Miller, it is a complete and utter fabrication. He gestured to Jessica Alvarez. The general counsel, with the precise movements of a predator, slid a sleek tablet across the table towards Karen. Ms. Miller, this is a sworn and signed statement from passenger Eleanor Gable, a retired schoolteacher who was seated in 2D. Jessica said, her voice sharp and clinical. She states, and I quote, "The flight attendant was hostile from the very first interaction. The young woman in 1A was perfectly polite, a model of patience. She simply requested a seatbelt extender, explaining she was pregnant. The flight attendant spoke down to her like she was a child before outright refusing the request." Jessica continued without pausing for breath. We also have a statement from passenger Ben Henderson in 3A. His words, "I was listening to music, but I took my headphones off because the flight attendant's tone was so aggressive. The passenger never raised her voice. The flight attendant was the only one who was escalating the situation." We have 4 other similar statements from every passenger in the first-class cabin. Karen felt a flush of heat creep up her neck. "They're mistaken. It was a confusing situation." Daniel Chen from HR spoke next, his voice carrying a tone of deep disappointment. "And this Ms. Miller is the maintenance and security log for the aircraft. As I'm sure you're aware on some level, our premium first-class suites have forward and aft-facing security cameras. They are for the protection of our passengers' belongings and to provide a record in case of security incidents. They are activated during all on-ground movement. They do not record audio, but as you'll see, the video is quite clear." He tapped a second tablet, and a silent, grainy, black-and-white video began to play. It was a cold, objective view from above. There was Simone, her movements calm. There was Karen leaning over her, jabbing a finger, her body language radiating aggression. There was Simone attempting to rise, not in an attack, but in what was clearly a defensive posture. And then there it was, the swing of her own arm, the violent snap of Simone's head. Irrefutable, clinical, damning. A strangled gasp escaped Karen's lips. She stared at the screen at her own ghostly image, committing the act. She had never known about those cameras. In 22 years, no one had ever mentioned them. "And then, of course," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "there is this." He nodded toward the large 80-inch monitor mounted on the wall. It flickered to life. The video was instantly recognizable. Liam Carter's video. But this was no longer on a tiny phone screen. It was life-sized, and it had sound. The boardroom was filled with the audio of her own voice, dripping with condescension. "In my 20 years of flying, I've never had a complaint." Then came Simone's voice, calm, firm, and reasonable. "It's not about comfort. It's about safety." Then her own voice again rising to a hiss. "I am the authority here. You will do as you are told." And then the sound. The sickening, sharp crack of the slap echoed through the high-tech speakers, as loud and horrifying as it had been in the cabin. It was followed by the collective gasp of the passengers. The video ended. The monitor went black. The silence that descended upon the room was absolute, profound, and condemning. Karen Miller finally broke. The trembling started in her hands and spread through her entire body. A low, guttural sob tore from her throat. Her professional mask, her composure, her lies, all of it shattered into a million pieces. "It was a mistake," she cried, the words tumbling out in a desperate, pleading rush. "A terrible mistake. I was having a bad day. I'm under so much stress. Please, I have given 22 years of my life to this company. 22 years. Doesn't that count for anything?" Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. The calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a cold, concentrated fire in his eyes. 22 years, Ms. Miller," he repeated, his voice low and intense. "For 22 years you have worn our uniform. For 22 years you have drawn a paycheck from this company. A company built on a single inviolable promise that every soul who steps onto our aircraft will be treated with service dignity and, above all, respect. And in a matter of minutes, you burned that promise to the ground. You didn't just have a bad day. You systematically targeted and abused a passenger. You refused her a simple standard-issue safety device. You chose to humiliate her rather than help her. And then you physically assaulted her." He paused, letting his words hang in the air like an indictment. "You want to talk about your 22 years of service? Let me tell you about the woman you assaulted. Let me tell you about Dr. Monroe. She is one of the country's leading pediatric cardiologists. She spends her days holding the fragile hearts of children in her hands. She was on that flight rushing to the bedside of her father, who she believed was dying. She is 6 months pregnant with a child that she and her husband have wanted for years, a child she fought for. That is who you struck, Miss Miller. That is the life you treated with such contempt." Karen stared at him, her tear-streaked face a mask of confusion. The level of detail was jarring. It didn't make sense. How? How could you possibly know all that about her?" she whispered. Marcus Thorne's face became an expression of pure, cold granite. He delivered the final devastating blow with the precision of an executioner. "Because Dr. Simone Monroe is my wife, and that was my unborn child whose life you put at risk." The world stopped. The air crystallized. For Karen Miller, it felt as though the floor of the boardroom had fallen away, plunging her into a black, soundless abyss. His wife. The CEO's wife. The random uppity passenger in 1A was the wife of the man who owned the entire airline. Every piece clicked into place, the immediate return to the gate. The presence of the station manager, the speed of the investigation, the CEO himself sitting at this table. It was not a corporate debriefing. It was a personal judgment. The full, crushing weight of her monumental, career-ending, life-altering miscalculation crashed down upon her. She had not merely made a mistake. She had committed an unforgivable sin against the throne itself. A broken animal sound of despair escaped her lips. "Oh God! Oh my God! I didn't know." "No," Marcus said, his voice devoid of any pity. "You didn't, but it shouldn't have mattered." He stood up, signaling the end. "Your employment with Aura Air is terminated effective immediately. You have disgraced the uniform. As of this moment, you are trespassing on company property and will be escorted out." He looked at Jessica. "Our legal team will be in direct contact with your union representative regarding the civil suit we will be filing against you for material damages to our brand and reputation. The criminal matter, Ms. Miller, is already in the hands of the Queen's District Attorney. We are, of course, their star witness." As 2 discreet but unyielding security guards entered the room, Karen collapsed in on herself, sobbing hysterically. They helped her to her feet and guided her out, her cries echoing down the hall she had once patrolled with such pride. Marcus watched her go, his expression grim. He turned to his stunned team. "This ugliness does not end here," he said, his voice ringing with a new, powerful resolve. "This is a new beginning. This cancer of prejudice was allowed to grow in the dark. We are about to flood this entire company with light." In the weeks that followed, Marcus Thorne didn't just manage a crisis. He ignited a revolution. He personally fronted a press conference, his public apology raw and direct. He announced not just the termination, but the vigorous prosecution of Karen Miller. He then introduced the Simone Monroe Initiative, a ground-up overhaul of corporate culture. It mandated deep, immersive training on unconscious bias, de-escalation, and dignitary service designed and co-led by civil rights experts. He publicly promoted Chloe, the junior flight attendant, celebrating her as the new standard of Aura Air integrity. He established the Liam Carter Journalistic Courage Scholarship at NYU. And most powerfully at the initiative's launch, a healthy and radiant Simone stood beside him. "What happened to me was born from prejudice," she stated, her voice steady and clear. "But the response to it can be born from purpose. We cannot erase the ugly moments of our past, but we have a profound obligation to learn from them, to build a better, kinder future." The story of Flight 777 became an industry legend, not just as a cautionary tale of one woman's spectacular downfall, but as the story of an airline that faced its darkest moment and chose not to hide, but to transform. Aura Air became a leader not just in luxury, but in ethics, a legacy of accountability, rebirth, and respect, forged in the fire of one hateful act and the unwavering conviction of a husband who turned a personal violation into a universal victory. The story of Karen Miller isn't just about a single catastrophic mistake. It's a testament to the fact that karma often works, not through mystical forces, but through the clear, direct consequences of our own actions. She didn't just lose her job. She faced a public reckoning, legal penalties, and the irreversible shame of her prejudice being broadcast to the world. Her 22-year career was erased by 22 seconds of hate. But the true karma, the lasting impact, was not in her downfall, but in the positive change it created. Because of her actions, a multi-billion-dollar airline was forced to look in the mirror and become better. New training programs were born, brave employees were rewarded, and a new standard of accountability was set. It's a powerful reminder that while one person's cruelty can cause immense pain, the response to that cruelty can create ripples of positive change that extend far beyond the initial event. If this story of ultimate accountability and transformative justice resonated with you, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Your engagement helps us bring more